Stepford County Railway was released in late November 2017. Since then, the game's become so popular and iconic that thousands of people play it every day, many of whom, including me, know almost everything about the game. Keyword: almost, because SCR has a last railway. A last railway that explains some of SCR's weirdest oddities. A last railway that nobody knows about except me. Welcome back to my channel. I know I haven't posted recently, but it's hard to make content while camping on a mountain. Regardless, I've been conceptualizing this video for a while now. Also, don't worry, as of this video, SCR update theories isn't cancelled. Let's get into this. Here's a question. Why do so many places in SCR have two pointlessly close stations? Stepford Victoria and Stepford Central, Bewley Park and Whitney Green, etc. are on different lines, and yet right next to each other. Port Benton and Morganstown Docks, as well as Elsemere Pond and Elsemere Junction, are pairs of stations on the same lines as each other but needlessly close. On that topic, Elsemere Junction has always been called that, even though it wasn't even a junction until version 2.2. Also, why isn't St. Helens Bridge just called St. Helens? Was there another station there? Well, all of this and more will be answered today. Let's start with the first thing I said. In most real-life cases of this, who separate railway companies in direct competition, wanted to serve the same place, but built two separate stations. This happened all over the UK, from London to Cornwall to Wales to Scotland to Manchester. This implies that back when rail first came to Stepford County, there were two major companies that owned most of, if not all of, Stepford's rail, who absolutely hated each other. We'll call them the Red and Green Companies. Also, I believe that originally, Morganstown Docks and Port Benton weren't on the same line, and instead each would have been a terminus of a line built by each company to the Port Benton area, which would have also been a major shipping hub back then. So, that explains those three, with the rest being tackled later. But to finish up this part, let's talk about something very important. Which companies served which stations? I believe that one of these companies, which would be the red one, served the stations which are now Port Benton, Bewley Park and Stepford Central, seeing as how Stepford Central is directly linked to Bewley Park and Port Benton today, likely with the same lines from all those years ago. So, that would mean that the other company served what are now Morganstown Docks, Whitney Green and Stepford Victoria. Now, the thing is, Morganstown Docks and Whitney Green are on the same line today, so that makes sense. But what about Stepford Victoria? Today, it's mostly served by trains that run through Stepford Central, which couldn't have happened back then in that situation. And it didn't. So now we get to talk about Tramlink. I'm being serious. Before we start this part, let me just explain something. While Tramlink and the original Metro never operated in canon, the plans made for them as well as the unfinished sites, former or not, all canonically existed at some point, as long as they did in the official SCR game and not a legacy edition, custom edition or other. There's also some more principles for my interpretation of SCR canon, but those aren't important right now. The reason I mention this is because the plans for these operators are very important here. You see, many UK light rail or metro projects are typically built on top of or parallel to former lines. For example, most of the Manchester Metrolink's Pink Line. And as we know from their plans, Tramlink would ran from Whitney Green to West Berrily, and the original Metro would have included track between Stepford Victoria and St Helens via Old Harrow. Why do I bring this up specifically? Well, I believe that the sections of those planned operators between Stepford Victoria and Old Harrow, as well as between Whitney Green and Berrily Denton Road, which is one stop before West Berrily, would have been built on former parts of the last railway, which perfectly lines up with the confirmed stops of this railway from the last part, and the fact that it wouldn't have shared track with the Red Company. This also answers one of the questions from the intro, the one about St Helens Bridge. On the original plans for Metro, you can see that there's a station called St Helens South. So, we can assume that this station and St Helens Bridge were once another of those anomalies. So, SCR has a last railway which used to run from Stepford, Victoria to Morganstown Docks via Whitney Green and these right-of-ways. But wait, there's a bit missing in the middle here. By filling it in, you will see that the line would have gone past Elsemere. But did it call there? Strap in, because it's time to finally get the answer to Elsemere Junction's name. In present-day SCR, the area of Elsemere has two stations, Elsemere Pond and Elsemere Junction. As mentioned in the intro, they're super close, only 0.3 miles away in fact, and Elsemere Junction's name wasn't accurate until recently. But what if I told you that it used to be? What I believe happened is that when rail first reached Elsemere, there used to be only one station there. The station which is now Elsemere Pond, which probably used to be called just Elsemere and was served by the Red Company. When the Green Company built their line, despite hating the Red Company, the two did agree to have at least one interchange station between the two lines. Since the lines would run very close to each other near Elsemere, they decided to build it there and thus opened Elsemere Junction Station, named after the nearby village. You see, in real-life cases of two very close stations being on the same line, one station was built when the line first opened, and the other was built later, usually to serve something ultra-specific like a park and ride, or to better serve the area it's trying to. And what can be more ultra-specific than an interchange? Anyways, being the only interchange between the two lines, the area around Elsemere Junction would have received a lot of development, mostly industrial, due to its proximity to two major railway lines. Today, many buildings around Elsemere Junction are large warehouses or residential buildings. This would likely be due to the historically industrial state of the area and prime development opportunities from the old factories and nearby transport hub. Eventually, Elsemere would become an industrial town centering mainly around Elsemere Junction Station, with the original Elsemere village being on the outskirts of it. At some point in time, beaching or some other event would axe both lines that ran to Elsemere. When the current Morganstown main line opened on the route of the old Red Company's line there, the station at Elsemere's town centre, despite not being a junction, would have been named Elsemere Junction after the original station that made the town what it was. Also, to avoid confusion, the station serving the original Elsemere village would have not been named Elsemere, but instead Elsemere Pond after the old village's main point of interest. So, that finally explains that then. But you may be asking, what about West Berrily? That and more in these few final messages. Why would the old line only go as far as Berrily-Denton Road? You may be asking to yourself. Well, the reason why the last railway couldn't have gone past there is due to the site of the tramlink station there being roughly parallel to Elsemere Junction Station, meaning that if it did go past West Berrily, it couldn't have gone past Elsemere Junction, ruining Elsemere's perfect explanation with no alternative in sight. There is, however, a separate explanation for West Berrily, but it will only make sense in a few episodes' time after I discuss more about the Green Company. Also, before the video ends, I'm going to clear some things up about this video and how it'll affect my channel, as well as clarifying and or theorizing about related things which you guys may ask. First of all, as I said at the start, this won't become the only series on this channel. SCR update theories is probably going to continue, with new SCR has law videos being posted mostly during periods when there isn't much update news to cover. Second of all, the reason why Stepford Victoria serves trains from the opposite direction today, compared to what it used to back then, may have been because SCR wanted to get rail further into Stepford City, but couldn't build a terminus right in the centre of the city, so instead they built it on the old site of Stepford Victoria Station to save money. Kind of like how the part of the Thameslink core in London between Blackfriars and City Thameslink proposed the line to Holborn Viaduct for the same reason. Third of all, the former Morganstown main line definitely couldn't have been owned by a third company. There are several reasons for this, but by far the most important one is that this hypothetical third company wouldn't have had a reason to exist. You see, this will be mentioned more in future episodes, but both of the other two companies clearly had reasons to exist. The Green Company would wanted to build a line from Stepford to Leighton, or possibly even further out, and the Red Company would wanted to build lines all around the county. This will be mentioned in more detail in future episodes, but those are the basics. Speaking of, I am just going to run though what I am going to discuss in future episodes of this series, as well as the history of West Berrily Station. I am also going to be discussing Stepford's location within the UK, the former railways of Leighton, the timeline and potential bankruptcy of the Green Company, my insane theories about the Whitefield line, and even more. That's all for today. See you in the next video.